Hey everybody, I'm VR Nosy, and today we are going to be having a little discussion time here about grown-ups, kids, multiplayer lobbies, and how do we all just get along? I was recently in a discussion in a Facebook group I'm in about, some adults wanting to play with other adults and some kids saying, hey, what about me? These games were made for me, right? And so, as adults, we've been playing these games, some of these games since 2016, and we've only played with other adults because in the beginning, you had to pay $2,000 or $3,000 for a PC. You had to pay for a headset. You had to be able to afford these things to even get into VR. It was kind of like buying a four-wheeler, right? It was a grown-up's toy. These games were for us. And then came along PlayStation VR. And then came along the standalone headset, Oculus Quest, which I love, and people started buying it for their kids for Christmas, and kids love it, and now we see an abundance of kids and multiplayer lobbies and games that we're used to playing with other adults. What do we find? We find a lot of screaming kids, we find screeching, we find cursing, we find the N-word being thrown around. But you also got to remember that there's kids out there who are well-behaved kids, who are respectful and who are mature and who can actually play the game a lot better than us sometimes, right? So how do we all just kind of get along? What do you got to look out for? As a parent, what do you have to look out for when your kids are going into a multiplayer lobby? A lot of times, the kids that are screeching and screaming, these aren't kids that are actually supposed to be playing the game that they're playing. For example, I play a lot of Rec Room. I've played Rec Room since 2016. When I first started playing Rec Room, it was 25, 35, 45-year-olds playing Rec Room. But you walk into a Rec Room lobby now, you're going to see a lot more 14, 15, and 16-year-olds playing Rec Room. And how has that changed the landscape of the game? Another thing you got to understand is that in order to play Rec Room on an adult account, you actually have to be 13 years old, or you shouldn't be on an adult account. And a lot of times, these kids that are screaming and screeching, they're not just kids. They're not supposed to. They're so young, they're not actually even supposed to be on an adult account. And so, the proper way to handle that is not just to mute them. If they're breaking the code of conduct of the game by being on an adult account, you should report them. And against gravity, in the case of Rec Room, the owners and makers of Rec Room will remove their account. But don't just report somebody just because you don't like them, or they're being loud, or they're playing music, or they're being a kid. But if you feel like they're younger and what they should be to be on the account, report them. And if you can figure out who's making the noise, you can also mute them. So, if you're a parent, I want to start off by saying a lot of people think Rec Room is just for kids. I can guarantee you, as somebody who's been playing Rec Room for, 5 years, well, not about 4 years now, at least since 2016, I have seen a lot of things in Rec Room that I don't think are appropriate for kids. I've seen 3D models of genitals. I've seen avatars that people have modeled in the shape of genitals. I've seen rooms for Spin the Bottle that are custom-made rooms people have made where people's avatars are making out and kissing. They even had a giant room with a bed in it where they could go in privately if they wanted to. This isn't Rec Room. This is the game with the paint and the splatter that your kids all play. Now, it used to be all adults. So, keep in mind, if you're a parent and you're letting your kids access these games, especially if your kid is under the age of 13, how old you're supposed to be on an adult account, you may be exposing them to some of this stuff. Now, Rec Room doesn't necessarily condone this stuff, but you're definitely going to be capable of running into it if you allow them onto an adult account. In my opinion, an adult account on Rec Room should probably be 18, maybe at least 16. It shouldn't be 13, but that's what it is. There isn't any way to say, I want to have a room with just 18-year-olds. And even if we did, people would still break that rule and they would still come into the game when they weren't supposed to and break the code of conduct. It's kind of became a norm. If you're a kid, you got to understand that when these games were created, it was adults playing them. That's who it was originally geared for. But as we've seen the evolution of the PlayStation VR and the Oculus Quest, the standalone headset. And we've got a lot more kids coming in. You know, a lot of these games are going to gear them more towards children because that's where they're making their money. It's a lot more accessible than, you know, spending $2,000 or $3,000 for the 30-year-old geek, right? And so we have to accept that we're going to have kids coming into our multiplayer lobbies, coming into the games that we all know and love and that we enjoy. I think as adults, we have to, you know, be willing to play with kids, teach them how to play. Maybe they're better players than we are. I've came across that before too, and they can show us old guys a thing or two. And if you're a kid, you got to realize that some of these games we've been playing for 4 or 5 years, and you're just now getting into it. And you may think it's a kid game, but remember, we've been playing it for a very long time. One of the things that I've seen abused in Rec Room, for example, is, you know, for 3D modeling, you can blow things up really big. You can shrink things down really small. You can blow yourself up really big, and you can shrink yourself really small. I go into a lobby where, you know, it's made for creators, and what happens is you find a lot of kids in there. Some of these kids probably aren't 13 and aren't even supposed to be on adult accounts. They're blowing up shotguns and pistols to the size of Mars. There are these huge things floating in space. There's 4 or 5 of them. They're giggling and they're laughing, and the servers can't handle it, and the game crashes. And now I'm rebooting my entire PC. Or I'm having to reload the game and potentially reboot my Oculus Quest. That wasn't what that was meant for. That was actually meant so that you could shrink yourself down really small when you're doing 3D modeling to try and get the details just right. Or that you could expand the item really large or really small so that you could get the details just right when you're doing 3D modeling. Whether you're creating landscapes or avatars or whatever it is you might be creating. But that's the difference in the way that adults play the game and the way that children play the game. And I think it's important that we as adults understand that kids are going to be kids. But I also think it's important as adults that if you have kids, that this is talked about. Because there's a lot of things in these games that your kids can be exposed to and that they can come across that you might not be aware is actually in some of these games. And if you're a kid, you also got to understand, you know, like us older people might want to play with people our own age. It isn't necessarily that we don't want to play with kids or that we think all kids are screaming and crying. We might reference it that way because we didn't come across it until they came into our games. But we just want people that we can relate to. I've had a friend once that was going to college, was going to work for the FBI, and we became pretty good friends in Rec Room. We played a lot of Rec Royale together. You know, I've made friends of other developers in Rec Room. Nowadays, it's hard to find anybody over the age of 15 in Rec Room. You know, unless you're like me and you got like a group of people that you play with your own age or people on your friends list already from back in the day. But I think what we all have to do is we kind of have to, as a VR community, and it's going to grow and it's going to expand. And we've got to learn for us all to be able to come together and play in harmony. You know, I know in games like Echo VR, you've got leagues and you've got people who play, you know, games and take it as serious as a Super Bowl. And all of a sudden they've got kids coming in there. But we also don't want to forget, you know, if you're a kid and you're playing this game, you don't want to feel excluded or feel like you're being bullied by the old guys. So we should be accepting of them and let them play with us. And if you're a kid and you got an old guy looking for a game, let him join. But you also got to be careful about who you're playing with. One of the things you got to understand about multiplayer lobbies is you actually don't know how old the person is that you're playing with. They could be 45, they could be 13. You can't always tell. And that's something you got to think about if you're a kid or you're a parent. You got to be careful about who you're actually talking to, what you talk to them about, because you don't know who you're talking with. And as a parent, I think that's something that y'all probably should keep in mind when you're putting kids in games that you think are for kids, and you put them on an adult account because they're going to be 13 in 2 years. Even if they are 13 and you're putting them on an adult account, you might want to think about, is that something you want to expose your son or daughter to? Because there's things I've came across, like I said, in Rec Room that I wouldn't want my kids coming across. So this is just something to think about. But at the same time, I think we got to be welcoming and we got to be an open community for everybody to enjoy. And everybody has to be able to enjoy VR. We should be accepting and respectful to all players. And I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts. You know, if you're an adult and you've played VR for a while and you've got kids coming into a game you've played for a long time now, what has been your experience, the good and the bad? Would you rather play with people your own age, or are you open to playing with people of all ages? And if you're a kid, what has been your experience with, us older guys coming into your lobbies when you're in there and you're playing with your friends? Are these good experiences or are these bad experiences? Should VR have a way for adults to play with adults? Or should it just all be everybody mixed in together and we all play how it is right now? How would we do that? How would we figure out if somebody is old, a certain age, to be able to join a certain group of people? Because we don't really have no way of filtering that. And right now, even like with Rec Room, you have people who come in and they break the code of conduct and they might be 8 and they're signing into a 13-year-old saying they're 13 so that they can join an adult account. You have parents who let their kids onto VR headsets that, and in multiplayer lobbies because they think it's a kid game and they really don't know what's in the game. So this was just kind of a discussion, like I said, I got into a conversation. I was debating with the 14-year-old. Somebody had posted and said, we play Echo VR, we want adults only, we're tired of these screeching kids. And the kid came along and he said, hey guys, not all kids are like that. I tried to be the kid's friend and take him up and say, you know what, I'll be your friend in Rec Room and we can play. I get it, I understand. But I'm also, this is why adults play Rec Room, and I can see where kids play Rec Room. And he turned back around and he said, well, I don't just add anybody into Rec Room, and especially people that are older than me. Kid, I was just looking out for you, man. But how do we, and I totally accept that. I think that's totally acceptable. But you also got to understand that, like, as a community and VR community, we've got to be, if you don't want to be friends with people that are older in your games, why are you complaining about older adults trying to play with people their own age? And as adults, do we look down to the younger generation playing VR games and say, hey, you know what, man, I'll be your friend, I'll play with you. If you need somebody to hang out with in VR, I'm playing. You can tag along. We can go play. We can be a team. We can play laser tag. We can play Rec Royale. We can do whatever we want. Or should VR be more focused for age groups, for people who are actually our own age? And how do we go about generating that? How is the landscape of VR going to change as we see more kids coming into VR? How do parents monitor their children when they're playing VR? Because you can't always see what your kids are doing. Especially in multiplayer lobbies where they could literally be talking to anybody. So these are just some things to think about and talk about, and I don't think that they should be hushed, but I also don't think that we should be disrespectful in our communications about them. People need to be open, they need to be respectful, and I think people need to be friendly and accepting. But it shouldn't be a hush-hush conversation either, because there's a lot of things in VR that the younger generation can get exposed to that a lot of people just really don't realize might be there. And as adults, I think we have to be careful what we talk about in VR when we're talking to other adults, because now kids can just come strolling into the lobby, which that didn't used to happen. So I'm curious what everybody's thoughts and opinions are on this. I would love to hear in the comments. Like I said, if you're an adult and you've played a game for a long time, you've got kids coming in there now. If you're a kid and you had adults coming in there, was it a good experience? Was it a bad experience? What are y'all's opinions on, us all just getting along and playing together, unified and having fun as whether it be gamers or VR enthusiasts? And for me personally, I'll play with anybody if they're respectful, if they're a good player, if they're nice. That's the way I treat people, and so I expect the same. And if they're not, and they break the code of conduct, I'll report you. But I think what's important is that we find a way forward, and that we as adults are thinking about how children are accessing VR, what they're accessing in VR. Anyways, guys, that's it. I'd love to hear in the comments. Like I said, if you found this interesting, subscribe to the channel, and like the video, share the video. Let me know what you guys think. And until next time, guys, I will catch you around. Stay safe, keep on questing, and enjoy VR.